Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today we're diving into a really fascinating and frankly urgent topic, Jordan. For decades, Jordan has been the absolute anchor of stability in a region that's famously turbulent. Like, if Jordan falls, the whole Middle East feels the shockwaves. But right now, it's facing this unprecedented perfect storm of overlapping crises. So let's jump right in and explore exactly what's pushing this historic kingdom to the absolute brink.
To start, we really have to look at the stark contrast between Jordan's global reputation and what's actually happening on the ground. Since gaining independence back in 1946, this Hashemite monarchy has cultivated this image as a totally reliable, stable model in the Middle East. But the reality today, it's vastly different. The kingdom is quite literally on the edge. It's caught in the grip of extreme internal and external pressures. We're talking massive economic shockwaves, environmental disasters, and intense geopolitical crossfire, all converging at the exact same time.
To make sense of all this, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with how this oasis is under threat, look at its tourism sector in freefall, and then talk about how the country is running bone dry. After that, we'll break down the geopolitical tightrope it's walking, and finally, its ongoing role as a massive haven for refugees.
Okay, Section 1, an oasis under threat. Let's set the stage.
You know the saying, geography is destiny? Well, that is definitely true for Jordan. It shares highly sensitive borders with Israel, the West Bank, and Syria. But despite being nestled right next to the chaos in Gaza and the historical conflicts in Syria, Jordan is deeply integrated with Western allies. It's actually the United States' main ally in the Middle East, and it famously signed a peace treaty with Israel back in 1994. And at the helm of all this, King Abdullah, who's ruled for 25 years. But as we're going to see, that historical stability is being tested like never before.
Which brings us to Section 2, tourism in free fall. Now, before all this recent turmoil, tourism accounted for a massive 15% of Jordan's entire GDP.
But take a look at this number. $280 million. That is the staggering amount of money the Jordanian tourism sector is losing every single month since the conflict in Gaza began. Even though the war is happening outside its borders, the perceived risk has just totally spooked European travelers. They're canceling flights in droves, and it's plunging travel agencies and local businesses into absolute chaos.
And the localized impacts, they're just devastating. Down south in Aqaba, on the Red Sea, luxury yachts are just sitting there docked. You'll only find a rare few tourists venturing out to dive in their underwater military museum. Then over in the Wadi Rum Desert, where they shoot all those Hollywood Mars movies, there's this dark irony. Those incredible luxury bubble tents that look like Martian outposts are sitting completely unoccupied, while the actual country faces very real environmental survival challenges. And Petra, the crown jewel of Jordan, daily visitors have plummeted from a bustling 6,000 down to just 1,000. It's practically a ghost town.
Behind these stats, though, there are real people fighting for their livelihoods. Take Usama, a Bedouin hotelier who actually pioneered the desert hotel industry in Wadi Rum. He says, "We have faced too many cases, even more than COVID-19. We have any benefits from the government to help the tourism sector. That just breaks my heart, It humanizes the data. Local business owners are facing this quiet desperation, with literally no alternative income to fall back on."
But here's the thing. The drop in international tourists isn't even the whole story. Beneath the unnervingly quiet facade in Petra, there's a simmering 30-year internal conflict. Bedouin tribes, like the Badul, who traditionally lived in the ancient caves there, have faced violent evictions by the government ever since UNESCO listed the site in 1985. Just recently, locals had their souvenir shops bulldozed and burned. So you're compounding economic misery with intense local friction.
Moving to Section 3, running bone dry. This is an entirely separate but equally dangerous environmental crisis.
Consider this. 92% of Jordan's land is desert. Let that sink in. It is quite literally one of the driest countries on the face of the planet. And right now, it is dying of thirst. So what does that actually mean for daily life? Well, in towns like Jerash, as one local put it, running water only arrives 1 day a week for every household. Think about that for a second. 1 day a week. Citizens have to store whatever water they can get in these big white roof cisterns, and when those run dry, that's it. They're cut off.
When that government water supply runs out, which costs about €7 for 5 cubic meters, by the way, citizens are forced to rely on private water trucks. Truckers race around selling water, but for 3 times the government price. When you consider that the average salary in Jordan is just around €550 a month, paying these massive markups just for a basic human necessity like water is a crushing financial burden for desperate families.
And the macro picture is honestly just as grim. Overexploitation and climate change are killing the region's most iconic landmarks. The River Jordan? Its flow has been reduced by a factor of 60 in less than a century. The Dead Sea has lost a third of its surface area in just 50 years, and experts are warning it could completely disappear by the end of the century. Meanwhile, local farmers are being strictly rationed to just 10,000 cubic meters of water a year. That's nowhere near enough to secure their citrus harvests. The land is just parched.
All right, Section 4, the geopolitical tightrope. We've seen the economic and environmental threats, but this is perhaps the most delicate and explosive crisis of them all.
To really understand the massive Friday protests erupting in the capital city of Amman against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, you have to look at the demographics. 60% of Jordan's population is of Palestinian origin. That is a massive, massive majority. So this places King Abdullah in an almost impossible dilemma. On one hand, he absolutely has to maintain crucial Western alliances. Jordan relies heavily on $1.5 billion in annual U.S. aid and hosts over 3,000 American soldiers. But on the other hand, he has to navigate intense domestic sentiment. Alienating a deeply aggrieved population that feels widespread solidarity with Palestinians, well, that could risk completely destabilizing the entire kingdom. And we're seeing these contrasting forces play out in real time. Opposition leaders like Rula al-Rab are openly denouncing Israeli actions as genocide, while massive crowds regularly chant in support for Hamas's armed wing. Meanwhile, the government is desperately trying to thread the needle. Back in October 2024, Jordan intercepted nearly 200 Iranian missiles aimed at Israel to protect its airspace, an act some locals actually viewed as a betrayal. Yet simultaneously, King Abdullah himself has participated in operations to heavily airdrop humanitarian aid directly into Gaza to show support for the Palestinian people. It's a razor-thin tightrope.
Finally, Section 5, a haven for refugees. Layered on top of everything we've just discussed is Jordan's long-standing role as a sanctuary for those fleeing neighboring conflicts.
80,000. That is the population of just one camp, Za'atari. It's one of the largest Syrian refugee camps in the world, sitting just 10 kilometers from the Syrian border. To put it in perspective, Syrians now account for more than 10% of Jordan's total population. What's truly fascinating here is the sheer permanency of this situation. The old tents in Za'atari, they've long been replaced by 25,000 prefabricated shelters. The UN distributes monthly grants via mobile apps, so refugees can shop at local camp businesses. Jordan has even fully integrated 19 schools within the camp, run by its own Ministry of Education. Over 12 years, 20,000 children have been born in this camp alone. Jordan is heavily managing this massive demographic, refusing to give up on them, even when its own resources are stretched to the absolute limit.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question. Caught between a dying environment, a collapsing tourism economy, and regional wars pushing its demographics to the breaking point, can the kingdom maintain its delicate balance? Jordan has survived crises before, sure, but the perfect storm it faces today is really unlike anything in its history. I want you to think about how these environmental, economic, and geopolitical threads are all so deeply tied together. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today on The Explainer. Until next time, stay curious and